And welcome back. Akins, if we could just return to some of the statements that Minister Warner would have made, him having some very, very strong views on the march today involving trade unions.
Sure. Well, firstly, let me deal with perhaps one of the last things that he said when he started to talk about the demographic, and this is very, very annoying, and I'm using that because, of course, we're on television, right? So I'll use that word. We cannot continue to allow our politicians to use this race card to mobilize supporters. Mr. Warner, in the censure debate in the Parliament, tried to suggest that the whole thing was only because of the race of the Attorney General, and was not slammed or knocked for that. And then he's saying now that the only people you're seeing in Woodford Square are African people, which, based on the clips that we have, is untrue. Yeah, so that we have to find a way really to move away from that, and I think a large portion of the population has moved away from that. Yeah. And I'm not interested in that tribal politics, because it has not worked. It cannot work. Because we have 10 votes, and you get 6 and I get 4. Yes, you have a majority, but you do not have enough to say that your mandate can exclude the 4 people. And that is what happens, so that you have, at different points in time, large sections of the population feeling alienated from what is going on. So how could you say then that, okay, well, we are in office now, this is UNC's government, all I'm seeing in Woodford Square is African people, so that, no matter how many of you all it is, there are an equal number of people who are happy with what we are doing. That logic cannot hold water in 2012 and 2019.
We need a politics in which, hear what, we're all Trinidadians. We're born here, we grow up here, our children are going to die here. We need now to put aside and not accept any politician that uses politically incorrect language in a public debate.
Correct.
It is high time, if you want to move towards a first world status, you cannot make such statements and still be in political office. A member of parliament in the UK had to resign because he used the word pleb. Pleb to a police officer. So we must never tolerate any politician that uses that type of language and express us to respond to that and give him legitimacy. It is basically a man gone mad.
Some may feel, gentlemen, that is just how Mr. Warner speaks. He has been very outspoken.
Being outspoken and being rude and insultive is fundamentally two different things. You can have passion, and if you want to basically expand your party base, right, then you need to have that perceived people you're just chastising to be part of your party base in your marginal constituencies. And for too long, the media allow politicians to set an agenda who are not that politically bright and who believe that money can buy them influence. And if this country wants to move forward, then every citizen, whether you're the fisherman from Cedros, right, or the fisherman in Charlottesville, you have equal right, and every politician must listen to their views.
Robert?
Well, I think I agree with my colleagues here. I think ethnicity should be kept out of these sort of issues. You don't try to prove a point by going, because I don't think about race, because I think all of us are the same race. I deal with the ethnicity part of it, right? So I think apparently, as you said, he may be a little under pressure, and he moves on with this type of argument. This type of argument is not really relevant in what we are doing right now, okay? I'm just going to give you a little joke and think about it. When I was working with a sort of French Creole firm, right? They're having jokes and things. And one of the fellas, he get kind of tight. One of the white fellas get kind of tight. And he said, listen to this, that the only good thing that good and black is a Coca-Cola. My grandfather is a black man, so I watch him, go ahead and skinny when we figure you got to say that joke. So from then on, I realized that certain things that people say, they have to be careful of how they say things, because it affects people in a real critical manner. And I am hoping that the Honourable Minister refrain from going on the ethnicity road and try and bring better arguments. And that's the example I was trying again to make sure that my General Secretary there, the General Secretary there, realizes why I am arguing that I am not seeing the type of support that Labour should be getting at this point in time. Look at when the Minister of Finance was insisting on that 5%. Okay, look at these things should have angered Labour much more than Section 34. Why is it that Labour was unable to sort of gender up a public interest in that 5%, because that 5% went against the whole grain of free and democratic collective bargaining. That was attacking the rights of the worker and the trade union movement. Okay, and when you examine those issues, one would have thought that such an issue would have been able to sort of, as I said, ensure that the vast majority of workers, organized workers, would have been able to sort of go out there and tell the government and Mr. Dukara and Minister Dukara that, listen, you are going in an area where you are disrespecting the collective bargaining, totally disrespecting the interfering with the workers' rights and interests, and there is where workers have to generate heavy pressure when they see their rights and interests are being attacked. And I was hoping that they would have avoided as much as possible ganging up with certain elements that I don't know who is their support. I am hearing about this one and this one. Who are their support? Right? 6 or 7 of those people who have placards there, nobody supports them. Where do they come from? Okay. So
I want to deal with a few things there. Yeah. One, on the issue of 5%, let's be honest about the chronology of things here. Yeah. Remember, early in August, we had just started a series of walkabouts and demonstrations. The last demonstration was in Arima, and then the Sunday night there's a press conference called by the Prime Minister to announce a state of emergency. Yeah? So we must remember that we did in fact start to galvanize, and we did in fact start, yeah, but we did in fact start to galvanize around the 5% issue, right? And then we were met with a state of emergency that more or less derailed that process, and you had to start over. Yeah, so that I don't think it's fair to say that nothing was done about the 5% and that we had not been gaining support through the streets of Arima. It was starting to build, and it was cut short. I also want to say that in relation, just to go back to Mr. Warner very quickly, I am not, and we generally, and this came up in our General Council this week, we are not concerned about Mr. Warner's defense and his anger, simply because we've been there before, meaning that he can be as upset as he wants. He can pretend to dismiss what is happening as much as he wants, because we've been there, and we've had PNM in 2010. We had PNM MPs being very dismissive of the mass sentiment being expressed by the population that it was time for them to leave. Right? You had persons, Mr. Manning, saying that he's the most vilified Prime Minister ever in the history of Trinidad and Tobago. So that's fine. That's fine. So Mr. Warner's rants and so on really don't bother me in the least. The fact is that in time, the chips will fall where they may, and I guarantee you that this is the last term for this government.
Derek, how strong is the trade union vote in electing a government?
Strong enough for them to be included in the People's Partnership Agreement. Strong enough to try to influence workers in constituencies such as Pointe-à-Pierre. We could drill it down. I could drill it down for you. In constituencies such as Pointe-à-Pierre to have an impact. Strong enough in perhaps in areas not necessarily Faizabad, but La Brea, to make La Brea more marginal. The MSJ strategically will look at their membership and then try to convert the membership into voters. What you look at the size of the public service, they are workers, and more importantly, they are voters. And if you basically do not look after workers and their interests, they are not going to be voting for you regardless of ethnicity. The country is now prepared. If you look at it, since 1986, that strata of the working class in some constituencies can become swing voters in your marginal constituencies. And therefore, every government must be careful that they measure benefit to workers and productivity to the country.
Some people felt when they heard that the trade unions were going to join in the coalition that it couldn't work from the beginning. Because you have the employer, you have trade unions are going to ask for whatever they want, and the employer is going to say, we can't give you that. And some persons wrote it off from the beginning. So it was not a shock to some persons about what had happened.
Sure. There's several things there, inside of there. We had felt that it was necessary, given the work that had been done by Fighton and several other civil society organizations, that the UNC really ought not to have been allowed to just go into government by themselves. That really would have been a complete misrepresentation of what would have happened between 2007 and 2010, because the UNC really, even during the campaign, look at the campaign that was run by UNIROS. It was not a UNC brand, it was a Kamla Prasad Bisesa brand, because had you run that UNC brand,
you'd have lost.
You'd have lost. So the country was not prepared to give the United National Congress a second shot at government, and we have to remember that. I do not think, however, that the UNC believes that in their own analysis. I think if you look at the real election results, there was an increase in voter turnout, overall voter turnout, of probably about 7 or 8%,
yes.
I think. Combine that with perhaps about 9% of the PNM voters leaving, and that's how you end up with as many seats as you do. But if now PNM has reorganized itself, galvanized itself in the way that it has now, you remove the MSJ element, the COP does not have the same kind of attraction that it would have had. There is no way that a UNC government is going to win the next election. So that what has to happen, but more than that, quite apart from that, we have to realize that it also can be a case where you have an exchange where, okay, so the next side comes in and starts to alienate now the UNC electorate. And I want to make that point, because the UNC electorate also has a responsibility in this. They have to tell their leadership, listen, all this thing, everything we're hearing here, all of that can't be wrong. All of it can't simply be because Gesapi, Ramsamuja, and Vidal are PNM. You know, we are doing something wrong. And if we want to stay in office, it is the responsibility of those who put leaders in place to keep their leaders in check. And the UNC electorate has a responsibility at this time to tell the leaders, listen, we didn't vote for Jack Warner to be Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago. We voted for Mrs. Kamla Prasad Bisesa. And she has disappeared. She has all but handed the government to Minister Jack Warner as the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago.
One of the things you must recognize that people, Kamla Prasad Bisesa benefited from a default vote against Patrick Manning, right? And just as quickly as they voted for Kamla Prasad Bisesa against Patrick Manning, equally now, that block of voters are now packing up. That block of voters are now disappointed. That block of voters must now be reached out to. And there must be a review of how the People's Partnership government deal with these swing voters, deal with the middle class, because you must ask yourself the question, we have had a growing middle class in this country historically. What percentage of that middle class are working class? What you may call working class. So nobody here views themselves as working class anymore. They're middle class. Our working community have grown up. They own houses, they own cars, they have small businesses, their children are educated. Right? And therefore, how are you going to reach out with them? And the rhetoric, the political rhetoric of 1970 and the race rhetoric is basically irrelevant now. Because people want better paying jobs. You're dealing into a wireless society. You've got to have a different sense of priorities.
All right. Let me just return to our Twitter board for a little while. Trini Marrow, I hope all the mouthers on Twitter and FB come out and march today. But what exactly is supposed to be the end result? The day our politicians stop liming, that's another tweet, OK Zachary. The day our politicians stop liming, kissing and sleeping in Parliament is the day we will take them seriously. And another tweet, Raul Gopi, definitely not supporting March. Let's focus on one of these tweets. What will be the end result?
Okay, well, as one of the organizations taking part, there are many different, let's be honest here, there are many different interests in this square at this point in time. I do not think that there is one homogeneous position to say that everyone is in the square because they want X, Y, or Z. You've listened to some people. Some people just want to be in a space where their children can grow up comfortably, and they're not seeing that under this administration. There are some people who are there because they simply want the government to demonstrate some kind of respect for the population. You have people there, quite frankly, who want an election tomorrow morning.
Yes.
Right? I'll tell you that Fighton is not part of that. Fighton is not part of that group, and we've articulated that already. What we feel at this point in time is that this must force the government now to do an assessment of our institutions. We have tried to put good men and good women to manage and preside over bad institutions, and that has just made good men and good women bad. Yeah, it's not saying that some of them they're not going there bad already, right? But what we have to do out of this particular activity now is the focus has to be constitutional reform, has to be institutional strengthening, because for us as Fighton and in our discussion, the Section 34, it's a fundamental thing. The breach of trust that the Parliament put in the Cabinet, that is more than enough for us, for the entire Cabinet to work. If you go to Parliament and you say to the Parliament, listen, we're going to do X, Y, and Z, and then we will proclaim. Whether the law is good or bad, if you breach that trust that the Parliament has put in you as a Cabinet, what you're saying is that you're really not concerned about the power and role of the Parliament. And if we are at that point, then Section 34 is just the tip of the iceberg for the things that are going to come, because the Cabinet is going to run the country unilaterally and not necessarily come to the people for everything. And when you get into that kind of arrangement, there's a word for that, right? We're going down a fascist road. And when you have somebody like the Minister of National Security, who on more than one occasion has tested his constitutional responsibilities, he is going to back up the Cabinet using our military.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the road that they're going to do. So the argument, it's not going to be about argument, it's going to be about force. And if you listen to his tone when he spoke just now, that is the only thing that I'm seeing. That he's quite prepared to use force by any means necessary to put their agenda on the table. And I am concerned, and we are concerned, that the population is going to respond to that. The population is not, Trinidad and Tobago has a history of that. The population is not just going to say, okay.
Well, that is why I cannot agree with you totally, because I am sure the Honorable Minister knows our history. We have a history of when we are pushed too far. We do things that, that some people might be considered not very nice, We have the Hussein riots, we have the water riots. We go through the Trinidadian history. As long as you push our people too far. So I am thinking that the Honorable Minister knows our history. We know our history, and I think he must be just having some little lapses, these days. But he knows our history. So, but what I thought too is that, and I have to get a little individualistic here, that as far as I was talking about the 5%, right? And I thought that some of the labor leaders, especially in the OWT area, they sort of, I thought it was lack of experience. They sort of helped turn the whole argument on a more of a political rule. You see, government, when you're dealing with straight industrial relations, right? Straight industrial relations, government is your employer, right? So there's a fashion that you have to proceed on and be accustomed to, that okay, they are the government, but as collective bargaining is concerned, your government is the employer. So when you get vexed with them, you cannot, you should not, right? As far as I'm concerned, in terms of the styling, you should not decide to say on a public forum that you're going to bring down the government because of your industrial relations, right? You change the whole thing from the politics of industrial relations to the party politics now, because this all the time you were dealing with the person across the table as an employer, but you go in a public place and say you're going to bring down the government if they don't do this and that. these politicians are very thin-skinned and fickle-minded, right? So you move from fighting the employer to deciding that you're going to change the government. As a whole universal move there. There's a whole change that you put yourself into. And there where it started. I heard the Honorable Minister mention it, right? Mention it too, that he's saying that the President said that he's going to bring on the government, and that is what we were very careful of, because when we were representing 35,000 government daily paid workers, let's say 7, 8, 9 years ago, we were particularly clear in our mind that the type of governments that we have, we will always try to show that we separate the industrial relation politics from the partisan politics.
This is purely political activity. In the next 30 days to 45 days, this is about basically, to some extent, the effect on the Tobago House of Assembly elections.
Right.
The Are We Boy factor going to emerge with Dr. Rowley being Tobagonian, the Are We factor, that's going to be fundamental. They're going to basically utilize, the PNM will utilize this Section 34 as a catalyst and an agent of a referendum on the leadership of Kamala Persad-Bissessar, using the Attorney General, using Honorable Jack Warner. What we saw today, if you understand what's also going to happen, is the anti-PNM votes in Tobago are going to be fragmented. If you see what Hochul Charles is going to be doing, if you see what Top is going to be doing, there is a level of insensitivity of understanding the political culture of Tobago. Tobago is about Tobago. When you put a platform, a UNC platform in Tobago, that's a recipe for a political destruction. Right? So what we're going to see is basically the capacity of Ashwa Jack to utilize a money campaign versus a principle campaign. And this is part of a momentum. It may not be intended to be that way, but will be interpreted that way, that the Tobago slide, if there is going to be a Tobago slide in the UNC, that could spin off into Trinidad for the local government and then subsequently for the general elections.
All right, gentlemen, we have 3 more minutes. Atkins, it is no secret that the relationship between the government and the trade unions, it has been strained. For want of a better saying, suppose anytime soon the government says, look, it's time to love again for the mending of the relationship. What do you think would happen?
In what way, though? I mean, what is on the table? At this point in time, we've made some clear calls. We've asked for the Attorney General to go, and we're very clear on that. I don't know that there's anywhere in the world that someone can say, I'm not qualified for the job and keep the job. Right? He's done that. I am not in a position to see how we will respond based on a hypothetical situation.
All right. We have 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Derek, you have 1.
I think every citizen has a right to express their political view.
Yeah.
And I think they should be wary of any politician denying them of that right. The day we lose that, we lose our well-being.
Robert, you have 30 seconds.
Yes, I have 30 seconds. And as I started, I do not like anybody to be fired.
Yeah.
That is my opinion. I was fired twice. I don't like anybody to be fired.
Yeah.
So when trade unions starting to act like employers, I get a little nervous that they want to fire people. Okay? And as you said, if the government decides to fall in love again, under pressure, well, therefore, I think they have learned their lesson, and I think love conquers all.
All right. Thank you very much, Robert Giuseppe, Industrial Relations Consultant, Derek Ramsamouj, Political Analyst. Earlier we had Harry Rudal of the Section 34 Group, and Atkins Vidal, General Secretary of Phyton. Thank you to all of our studio crew. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you to all of our outside broadcast crew. Thank you very much. And remember that we are going to have a little later a footage of the protest in our 7 o'clock newscast tonight. So stay tuned for that. Thank you very much.